Anxiety, depression, nightmares, addictions, these all can be debilitating at phases in our journey. But did you know that these exact things can be signs and symptoms of awakening into your spiritual gifts? What are spiritual gifts? This is your psychic abilities, your ability to connect with the unseen realm, to channel spirit guides, to connect with the ascended masters, to know things that are beyond the physical realm. And we all have access to this dimension of reality. In today's video, I'm going to show you some techniques to get into these spiritual powers and ways to use the challenges themselves as the techniques to break through. My name is Anjani Segrist, and welcome to Awaken the Dream School. Dun, dun, dun. Stick with me through this video, and I will give you a practical step to break through some of these challenging topics into opening your spiritual gifts. Imagine that you are outside under a fully starry sky at 4 a.m. Actually, between 3 and 6 a.m. is known as the hours of God. This is a time where it's very peaceful, very quiet. The sky is fully illuminated with stars, and you are connected with the ancient wisdom that our collective ancestors watched to know what time it is, to understand where they were and where they were going. So imagine you're there under the sky, and as you're watching the planets and shooting stars and feeling really connected to your spirit guides, the light beings and ascended masters, whatever you consider to be reflecting back to you in that sky. And then suddenly the sun starts to rise. As the sun is rising, it fills that sky with this very bright, overpowering light. As that light overtakes the darkness, everything that we were connecting with is suddenly out of sight. We still feel it, and we still know that those light beings or stars in the sky, we still know that they're there, but we can no longer see them. This is exactly what the 12th house in your astrology chart is. It is that place of great mystery. You can't see it because the light was so bright and overpowering that 12th house. Now, what is this light? On your chart, you're going to see the ascendant, which is the rising sign. The rising sign is your first house, and it is your physical body. It is what you're here to perfect and master, your path to ascension, how you're rising to mastery in this life. But we're not going to be talking about the first house in this video because we're looking at the 12th house. The 12th house is known as the house of self-undoing. It's the house of prisons, mental hospitals, and things that we do that can be very destructive. So it's not really all doom and gloom, because actually, the 12th house is our connection to that unseen realm. They are there, the stars, the planets, the constellations, everything that we were looking at during the hour of God between 3 and 6 a.m. It's still there. These are your spiritual gifts, some of your connection to the collective consciousness. The 12th house is the sea of consciousness. It is a place where all of our dreams bubble up from. Another thing I like to think about with the 12th house is this question: what was Creator dreaming of when you were created? What is the dream Creator had for you for your life? The reason that it's called the house of self-undoing is because in our current culture, we don't have any training about how to do dreams, how to do our visions, how to connect with the collective unconscious. So in the 12th house, the reason it's called the house of self-undoing is because we are not doing the work of connecting with the collective unconscious. The 12th house is our internal water. It is what, like that starry night full of spirit guides, full of illumination of stars and constellations, these stars and constellations which hold every single story that any culture has kept and told, and it holds power. So in our 12th house, this is where we hold power of a story that now it's untold, because we're not connecting with that level of reality unless you are looking at your astrology chart and saying, okay, I have Chiron in the 12th house. What does that say and how can I work with that? So what we're going to do today is I'm going to guide you through, either using your chart or not using your chart, some practical techniques that you can do to tune in with what the undercurrent of your reality is. What was that full brightness of the sky before the sun came up and blocked out the mystery with this bright illumination? Before we get started with the practical techniques that I'm going to give you, let's just investigate a little bit more about the 12th house. So there's a few differences between the 8th house and the 12th house. They are different houses and they have different context to them, but there is a similarity, which is, if you think about what I just mentioned about the first house being where the ascension happens, the sun rises and brightens up, and then the light blocks out the darkness being the 12th house. When you look at the 8th house is right before sunsets. So these are both liminal spaces. The first thing you're going to do is look at what sign the 12th house is in on your chart. And when I say that, the first house is always going to be the rising sign. And then you can count from the first house. We're going to go down all the way around. And then the 12th house is going to be the very last house before the first. So first you're going to see what sign your 12th house is in. And then you're going to see if you have any planets in that 12th house. So if you do have any planets in the 12th house, especially if it's the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, or Mars, these are the most personal of our identity. They're very much connected with how we show up in the world, like our ego identity. So if you have any of these 5 planets, which are called the personal planets, in your 12th house, this video is going to be especially important for you because you probably have a lot of the tendencies of feeling anxious, feeling depressed, having addictions, because the 12th house is very connected with addictions. And why do we get the addiction? It's because we are looking for something that we cannot see in the light. So addictions take us into a darker place, which will help us connect with the dark, but it's doing it in a false way. It's not going to actually get us what it is that we're looking for, because the addiction itself will take over any type of work that we're trying to do. And this will not help you get into your spiritual gifts. I know a lot of people are convinced that smoking weed or using psychedelics is breaking them through, but it's actually not. It can, okay, so using something like a psychedelic can show you what's in your 12th house. It can show you the material and the contents, but it's really up to you to get into that material consciously, to create a reliable map to get there, to do whatever work is necessary there, and to get back. A lot of times with psychedelics, people will, not just psychedelics, but if it's alcohol, any substances, a lot of times people will get there and they can't get back. And the substance becomes a substitute for what it is that actually could be happening, which is building up our connection with our spiritual gifts. Again, when I say spiritual gifts, I'm talking about telepathy, intuitive gifts of being able to sense beyond the physical senses, all the clairs, being able to see. That's basically the same thing I just said, being able to sense beyond the physical senses. Sometimes with substance abuse, we actually can fry our sense organs and our extra sense organs. What do I mean by fry? It's like if you plug something into a light socket that the voltage was too high and it burns out the circuit. So sometimes using a substance can burn out our circuit, and the circuit is our nervous system. Taking care of our nervous system by eating fats, by eating real food, having a lot of minerals, sleeping well, waking up with the sun, going to sleep shortly after the sun, all of these things, which are very basic, are vital to health. And if it's vital to health, it is vital to your nervous system. And your nervous system is really the conductor between the extrasensory world and the physical senses. So one thing that you can do right now, check in with your, I'm gonna call it symptoms, but where you feel either deep rest, depressed, you feel a weight on your shoulders that's like kind of really got you grounded, maybe stuck down to the couch, or right after work you just want to go home and sit and whatever it is that you do to, what they say, decompress, but you're actually really compressing down. Or if it's something that you like to do to get elated, because a lot of times when people are experiencing symptoms of depression, they will either want to get more grounded because it's like what the body is naturally doing is like wants to lay down and sleep and doesn't want to get up in the morning, or we want to bypass this whole process of deep rest. And so we're taking things like caffeine, coffee, stimulants to raise our energy up, even though our body isn't there. So check in with your symptoms. Like, what is it that you feel at the end of a day? That's one. What is it that you feel at the end of a day? The end of the day is basically when you're complete with whatever your tasks, your work, whatever it is that you've completed the things that you need to do for the day. How do you feel at the end of the day? Next question, how do you feel in the morning when you first realize that you're no longer flying in fairyland with all of the, or swimming with the dolphins or whatever your dream was? When you first realize like, oh, here I am, I'm here again. When you first wake up, how do you feel? What are the first thoughts that go through your mind? This is very important for the 12th house material because, as we mentioned before, and what we're getting more clear on, is that the 12th house is that spot in the sky that's fully illuminated with stars but has just become invisible by the rising sun. So all of this magic is there, but we just can't see it, but we know that it's there. And so a lot of times we'll use something to tune back into that 12th house section or piece of our lives. So the way you feel right when you wake up is very telling of what your 12th house material is. For one reason, you just came from dream time. Dream time is 12th house time. So just coming from there and knowing, okay, the first words, like I would recommend to get your dream journal out. If you've been following Awaken the Dream School, hopefully by now you have a dream journal. Mine is right there next to my bed with a little reading lamp on it, so I can just flick the lamp on. Bring a pencil with you because sometimes the ink doesn't work and you wrote a bunch of things and when you get up in the morning realize that it wasn't working. So pencil is good. And write out the first thoughts that you have upon waking up. These are just two simple things to see. What are my symptoms and how do I feel at the end of the day? How do I feel? What are the first thoughts that go through my mind upon rising? Now, you can also, if you're Astro Savvy, you can look at your chart, see what is the 12th house. My 12th house is Aries. And then you can look, what planet do you have there? Or what planets? The more planets that you have there, the more content that you're going to be working with in the 12th house. I've said this in other videos. Empty houses do not mean that you don't have access to the material of that house. Not at all. Empty houses say that there are less obstacles. It's like there's less planetary forces in the room or less people in the room. The less planetary forces that you have in a house, the more of I call it a non-issue. It's like a non-issue, meaning that it's not going to be a part of your life that's super complicated or something that you really need to spend a lot of time on. The more planets that you have in the 12th house, the more time that you are going to be required to spend working with your unconscious material, not just your unconscious material, because the 12th house is our connection to the collective consciousness, what Carl Jung called the collective unconscious. So through dreaming, that's why in a lot of the indigenous cultures, they had dream circles. They would wake up in the morning and share their dreams. They took this very seriously because the community or the tribe shared their dreams because those dreams were prophetic. They were showing something that we're missing in daytime reality. So it's very important to capture fragments of your dreams and just writing those down in the morning when you wake up. The more fragments of a dream that you can capture, the more and more your unconscious body mind will be alerted to the fact that you are trying, you really want to get in touch with this part of yourself. Tokopa Turner had a thing that she did. It was like a class, like a workshop I took with her in 2019 called Courting the Dream. So like, when you in courtship with somebody, you want to make yourself trustable. You want to make yourself trustworthy of this other being to come into your life. So courting the dream means that we are making ourselves trustworthy. And one of the things to do that is to show consistency. Like if you were, let's say you're a man and you want to court a beautiful woman, what are you going to do? You are going to consistently show reliability, your ability to relate, your ability to provide support. You're going to be consistent and reliable. With our dreams, it's the exact same thing. I think of our dreams like a woman. It's very unpredictable, fantastical, magical, very like nightmarish at times, very, what do we call this thing? Nighttime emissions. You can be very exotic, erotic, like everything that's possible in life is possible in your dream time and a little bit beyond that. So writing down whatever fragments of your dreams that you get, as you're doing that process, more and more of your dreams will stick with you. So this is one way of getting into the 12th house material. That way we don't have to act out the toxic substances of life, because what those toxic substances are, like when we get addicted to something, is really us looking for our connection to this unseen realm. So one thing you can do is working with your dream journal, paying attention to the dreams. Another thing that you can do is going outside and connecting with the spirits of the land that you're on. Whatever country that you live, whatever city or rural space that you live in, there are spirits of that land. Either people who have passed away and are no longer in physical bodies, or the spirits of the trees, the plants, the animals, nature is loaded with spirits. So being able to start, what do we call this? In Western herbalism, we call it plant sit. You sit with a plant and get to know the plant. You can sit with a rock, sit with a tree, go to a mountain, or whatever is available to you in your environment. Just right outside your backyard, you can have a plant, or you can go to a city park bench, whatever it is, somehow going outside and connecting with the nature spirits. This might sound crazy. It might seem ridiculous, but I promise you that if you want to get to the root of these 12th house self-undoing things, which can be addictive habits that we have, anxiety, depression, doing a plant sit, sitting in nature, connecting with the spirits, even just having this concept of like, okay, I want to connect with the spirits, and using your physical senses, sight, smell, taste, touch, hearing. And then one thing that my son gave me when he was probably 5 years old, he was like, sit down, get into this meditative posture, listen to the sounds. Okay, listen beyond what you hear. What do you hear beyond that? Do the same thing with your vision. What do you see? Expand it out. What do you see beyond that? With your sensation, okay, what do I feel? What do I feel beyond that? When you ask this question, it will expand your senses just a little bit. And if you do that every day, expanding your senses just a little bit, you will really strengthen your ability to connect with the unseen realm. This will help with, let's talk about anxiety. This will help with anxiety. One thing I want to mention about anxiety is that a lot of times, well, I'll give from what happened in my experience. I was having anxiety and it felt like prickly all over my body. And when I would go into spaces that were full of people, it was like so much energy, and every cell and pore and hair follicle of my body was like tingling. This was a time of great awakening of my spirit, connecting with the spirit of the universe. It was like that's what's happening, that it's like heightened sensitivity to the extra sensory world. This was also a lot of vivid dreams, and beings from my dreams would start to appear. Like when I would wake up in the morning, I would see the thing that was in my dream, like with my physical eyes, and I would blink, 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 and it would finally dissolve. But very, very awakening time for me. I did go the route of taking medication at first. I went to therapy, I went to a psychiatrist, and I was doing hypnotherapy, all kinds of things. When it first started happening, I was freaking out. I was really freaking out. I was like shaking, and it was a lot of energy. And so another thing is that when that level of anxiety is happening, where you're actually moving into having panic attacks, let's think about the 6th and the 12th house axis. The 12th house being all this unseen extrasensory world. Right opposite of the 12th is the 6th house. The 6th house is the mundane, practical things of everyday life. So when it gets to this really heightened sense in the, like I mentioned, every hair follicle is tingling, and now I want to look around. Okay, there's my plant, there's that crystal, there's that piece of Palo Santo, there's, am I safe? Okay, there's nobody here. My bed is made. The couch is like this. Okay. It's like getting very detailed and practical into what exactly is going on in the present moment. Where am I? Where's my body? Locating yourself in the present moment. That's the 6th house. This, we can start to slow down our heart rate. We can practice the breath. Breathing is very, very crucial to the 6th and 12th house axis, because as you've heard, inspiration has a connection to spirit, and that's the 12th house. And then when we get into the 6th house, it is the repetition and the pattern of breathing. So this is going to be very grounding if you're actively having anxiety. and to know that this anxiety can be an awakening to your spiritual gifts. And I hope that that can be very helpful for you. Please comment, ask any questions. Let me know how you are working with your spiritual gifts, and if you have any, what happened for you when you went through anxiety, when you were going through panic attacks, or how was your awakening? Awakening meaning realizing that there was so much more beyond the physical world. That's what the 12th house is, beyond the physical world. So as far as your practical techniques, so far what we have is practicing breathing, some repetitive, well-organized 6th house breathing patterns. Breathing pattern is a 6th and 12th house thing. So we want to get into coherent breathing. You can either do inhale to a count of 6, little slight pause, exhale to a count of 6, little slight pause at the bottom. So you're doing those little slight pauses at the bottom and the top of the breath. These pauses are the spaces between the inhale and the exhale. They are extremely magical, and there's other videos I have on YouTube talking about this. In Tantra Yoga, it's called the Kumbhaka. The Kumbhaka is that pause, the breath pause, slight retention. A lot of magical things are happening there. I would refer you to James Nestor. His book is called Breath, where you can get all the science about what's happening in coherent breathing and using healthy breathing patterns. So we have the breath, we have your dream journal, which is going to be very helpful. And we also have checking in with your symptoms. What do you feel? How do you feel at the end of your day? What are the first thoughts and feelings upon waking up in the morning? So those are your techniques. Please feel free to leave any comments in the description box below. I'm going to leave some other resource links for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.